Hey everybody, welcome back to Fit Tip Tuesday and part 2 of custom bra cups and foundation for a tankini bathing suit top. Last week I showed you how to create the pattern pieces for the custom cups and the PowerNet foundation. Today, before we get started constructing those pieces, I'd like to just back up and just show you the back of my tankini and how I'm quickly going to create a back lining piece, because I did not do that last week. Last week we created these 3 pieces for the PowerNet support or foundation, and what I want to do is use this side front piece to determine how long the back lining or support needs to be. So I'm gonna put it right sides together with my back, so you can see that it has to go to here. Okay, so that's really all I'm going to do for this. I'm going to just mark the side seam to make sure it's the same length, so I know it'll sew together. And then I'm just going to quickly trace this off and cut it out. All right, so this is going to be the pattern piece for my Power Mesh foundation. And I just want to true this up a little bit. I want to make sure I have enough of a right angle here so it doesn't look like a V. Sometimes when I trace, that can get a little sloppy. So make sure you have right angles anywhere you're going to cut something out on the fold or attach it to a left and right side. All right, so now just anytime I trace or work with a new pattern that's a trace copy, I always double check to make sure my shoulder seams are matching. And they are. Just wanted to double check that. All right, I've put away the pieces for the Power Mesh foundation. Let's start by cutting out our cup pieces. And again, just to remind you, I'm using this 1/8 inch foam. It's like laminated with a nice silky fabric on both sides. So this will be perfect for coverage underneath my tankini. And I'm going to cut them out single layer. If you haven't cut your pieces out yet, I would cut them out on the line, because when you go to cut out on something spongy like this foam, you could tear your pattern pieces if you cut through the paper pattern and your foam at the same time. So I'm just going to skim along the edge. Like this. And because I'm working with black, I'm going to use pins to mark my notches. Okay. So before I pick it up, I'm just going to put a pin here. And here. Oops. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is just flip my pattern piece over and cut out the other side. All right, and again, let's put pins. You can't, okay, I know that some people like to clip in to mark their notches, but remember, we cut off the seam allowances here, so there's no seam allowance to clip into. So please, if you are a clipper to mark notches, don't do that in this case, because we don't have a seam allowance. So these pins will mark our notches without, without creating little snips. All right, let's see how I can fit this other side in. I think I'm gonna go this way. Because these are gonna be inside between a lining and the fashion fabric, I'm not too concerned about being on grain here. So I'm just gonna try to fit them in the most economical way possible. Okay, so now we have our 2-cup pieces. This one goes with this one, and this one goes with this one. I want to make sure I'm sewing the right one right side up to the correct one right side up. So those are lined up the way they're going to sew. We need one more thing to add to our seam because we're going to butt up these edges and zigzag them together. So to support that butted up seam, we're going to use this non-stretch, very firm nylon fabric. All right, so I'm going to cut a wide strip like this that I can use to support both seams when I go to sew. So let me set up my sewing machine and I'm going to show you how to sew these cups together. What I'm going to do to start is I'm going to put this nylon fabric underneath my presser foot, and then I'm going to bring in my pieces. I'm going to lay my pieces right on top like this, butting up the edges. And then once I put my presser foot down, that holds it for me, and I can set my machine up for a triple zigzag. A triple zigzag is a zigzag that takes 3 stitches in each direction. So basically it's going to go stitch, 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 and so on. All those little stitches are really effective at supporting a butted seam like this. So I'm just going to leave it at its default setting, and I'm just going to start stitching. So the nylon does 2 things. It allows me to start right on the edge of my cup. It acts like an lead-in for this foam fabric, so I can back tack and stitch. Now, as I'm stitching, I am keeping the butted edges right next to each other, sort of pushing them together, and I'm keeping my presser foot centered on that, where they're butted up. So, and as I come to my notches, I'll take these first set of pins out, and you can see I'm just pushing it together like this. Now that I've gotten about halfway, you can see the cup starting to form behind the presser foot here. Okay, so see, I'm just lining up the ends, and I want to make sure I stay on this nylon fabric. I'm not concerned if I'm in the center because I'm going to trim all the extra away. Let's look at that. See how nice that is? Now what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to take my scissors, if I can find them, and I'm going to just trim away along this one side. I'll fix the other side later. I just want to have this piece to sew the other one. So I'm literally just trimming it away close like this. If you lay your scissors flat against the fabric at an angle like this, it makes it easy to trim fast and close to your stitching. See, I didn't fuss with that at all, and it's almost perfect. All right, let me just use this strip to do the second cup. Okay, so line them up. And remember, as I go, I'm gonna just keep it butted right up next to each other. Okay, almost done. Okay, all right. Let's take a look at these custom bra cups. All right, so again, to get this fabric off, I'm going to use my big Gingers shears, and I'm just going to lay it off to the side and just quickly skim off this extra fabric. This isn't going to show because it's going to be sandwiched between the fashion fabric, you know, the wrong side of the fashion fabric, so you really don't have to worry about doing a super neat job. We just want something firm that will support this butted up seam. I do see how nice this is. There's no bulk. It's really nice. All right, so let's look and see how nice these are. You can see I've got these two lovely custom bra cups to line my tankini with. I'm super excited. All right, so the next step is to cut out our pieces for the foundation out of this powernet. And I'm hoping my back fits this way. Yay, it just fits. I'm super excited. I was worried it was going to be a little bit too long. So easy peasy on this one. I'm just going to fold my power mesh, you know, along one end here until I have a wide enough piece to cut out my center back, like this. And I might as well just do a quick check to make sure I'm folding it on grain. So that's 9 3/4. That's 9 3/4. So let's now lay this on the fold. I'll use my big Armani pattern weight here. All right, so now I'm just gonna use my rotary cutter and cut this out. All right, so I'm just gonna cut this out. All right, so there's my back. And now I'm going to cut out my front pieces. So the one piece that's cut on the fold is my upper front piece. So let's see how that's going to fit. So this needs to be on the fold right here. All right, so little pattern weights for this job. All right. So I can cut the... All right, so my... Okay, so now my lower front needs to be cut on the fold as well. So here's my center front. So I'm just going to place that on the fold like that. So let's cut that out. All right, let me just true up this bottom here. All right, so there, now we have our upper front and our center front on the bottom. Now we just need these two side pieces. Okay, so now I've got all of my pieces. All right, so here are our cutout power mesh front pattern pieces. The next step is to sew them together. I'm going to set my serger up for a 4-thread stretch stitch. I'll see you back here in a minute. Okay, I have my serger set up with a 4-thread stretch stitch. The thing I want to talk about first is when you're working with power mesh and your serger, your differential feed setting is going to be similar to using a woven non-stretch fabric. I tried it with on a scrap, and you can see here when I had the differential feed set on a number higher than 1 or higher than N, making the front feed dogs go faster than the back, it pushed too much fabric underneath the threads, and you can see it makes it look like it's a jumbled up mess. And then when I put the differential feed on N or neutral, meaning the front feed dogs are going at the same rate of speed as the back feed dogs, I got a nice smooth seam with no stretching. So set up your serger for a 4-thread. Your differential feed will be set at N or neutral, and then you're good to go. So I'm going to start by putting my lower pieces together, and I'm just going to line up the ends like this. I'm not going to cut anything off. I'm just going to skim the edge. And I'm going to basically manage the curved piece to line up with the straight piece as I go. So as I go, I'm just going to wing it around, and I'm keeping track of my bottom edge to make sure that's going to match. So one seam is done. Let's do the opposite side. And again, I want to keep my curved fabric on top so I can keep an eyeball on it. So this time I'm starting on the bottom edge so I could keep the curved edge on top to manage it. So that was nice and easy. Now let's put the upper front piece on, and for this one I'm going to use a few pins. The side seam has a little bit of an angle to it, so you should see a little triangle sticking out. So I'm going to pin each end, and then I'll pin it in the middle just so I have some guidance here. All right, so let's start on one end, and as soon as I get it under the presser foot, I'm going to have to remove that pin. And I'm just going to stretch it out to make sure it's matching, and then just hold it in the middle here. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, so now I have my whole front put together. Let's take a look at it. All right, so you can see I've got this shaped support for my cups. So let's bring those back in. And what I want to do now is I want to position those underneath my form. And what we're going to do to attach them to the power mesh is we're actually going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to use that zigzag stitch to sew them on. And the cool thing is that will protect the raw edges of the cup with the foam, and it will do a good job of adhering the cup to the power mesh. All right, let's look at it from the wrong side. What we're going to do is we're going to take the side that has the nylon fabric supporting the seam is going to go up against the serged seam allowance. And that way we'll have a nice smooth surface for the lycra or fashion fabric to lay on. So I am going to pin this to the seam allowance, and I'm going to start them about a ½ inch from the top because that's approximately where they were positioned on the pattern initially. And I want to make sure my seam allowance does not roll, so I'm just going to sort of put it together like this. And actually, you know what? I just had another great idea. I'm going to take a piece of Wonder Tape. Let's fold it like this. This will make it easier. I'm going to take my Wonder Tape and let's put it on the actual seam allowance. And this will make it very easy to get that cup to stay put. This is the wash away Wonder Tape, so after I wash it, it'll disappear. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure it's on there pretty good. Then I'm going to peel it off. Then all I have to do is take my cup and line it up with that Wonder Tape and sort of adhere that right to the nylon strip. And that'll make it really easy to position it like this. See how nice that is? Then I can fold this back over, and we know we've got that on nice. All right, so there's one. You know, because I'm using the Wonder Tape, I think I'll set them both up the same way. So let me get this one over here. I'm just going to flip back the fabric. And I'll take my Wonder Tape and I'm just going to put it on the seam allowance. This makes no fuss and muss. Okay. Okay. All right, so now let's get this second cup lined up. Okay, so I'm just sticking it on. All right, and let's make sure everything looks nice and even. Okay. And then maybe just to keep it from becoming unstuck, I'm just going to put a couple pins. But that will do a nice job of holding it while we sew. So now let me just put in a few pins. Okay, making sure that the cup is about a ½ inch from that seam. So I'm just going to put in a couple pins along the way now that it's, you know, I'm just going to put in like maybe 4 pins. I'll put 2 on the seam and then 1 on either side, and that'll hold it for us. And then let's put 1 over here. All right, so there's one side. And let's get this other side. Okay. All right. All right, so here are my cups pinned into my power net. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my sewing machine set back up, and we're actually going to stitch around the outside edge to secure the cup around the edge. So let me get my sewing machine. The nice thing about using this triple zigzag is it will stretch with the fabric, so there's no popping stitches. If you wanted to finish this lower edge with some elastic, you could do that too. All right. So see what a nice little hem that makes? And you can see that it stretches really nice. All right, so I've got that finished. While I'm here, I think I'm just gonna zigzag this the same way. So I'll just turn it up that 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so we have our front and we have our back. So if we put these right sides together, the last thing I'm going to do today is sew the shoulder seams using a straight stitch. And then this lining will be ready to put together with the outside of my tankini. And for those instructions, please check the video on how to finish a neckline and armhole with a facing. All right, so now let me just sew my shoulder seams. And then we're going to call it a day. Okay, let me just... All right, there's one. And here's the last one. Okay. All right. Okay, so here is my completed support for my tankini. I'm really excited to try this because I think it's going to work great. If you have any questions about working with powernet or the foam to make the cups, please post your questions in the comments and I will help you. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial, and I will see you next week for another Fit Tip Tuesday.